So, dear speakers, we are very happy and grateful that you reacted so quickly to our new format of this conference. Unfortunately, as Marina and Oksana already said, due to the terrible shelling, most of Ukraine is without electricity and the internet for several hours. So we have a format of discussion between speakers without an audience. And we will make a recording and publish it on our channels. But this discussion panel is very important in the context of our belief in our victory and better future. So allow me to introduce the moderator of this panel, Marina Ilchuk. She's a member of the Women's Energy Club. She's a member of a board. And also she's CMS Cameron McKenna Council. And I wish everyone a good and productive discussion of the debate on the topic ensuring gender and climate sensitive financing for green recovery. So Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you everyone for being here, for making it happen. I think we are having an incredible panel. And myself personally, I think that with each of you, I would hold at least, like, if not a separate conference, but at least a separate webinar, because some of you I know personally, some of you I was introduced to, and I'm really excited about the experience you have about what you are doing. For this reason, as mentioned by Anastasia, today we had severe rocket shelling in Ukraine, and our energy infrastructure was targeted. And I understand that lots of people who were registered, like members of our club who were registered for the meeting and for these discussions, they cannot join, but they will see in record. So I really hope that all of you and all of your beloved ones are safe. And exactly because we think that the main aim of Russia, who was just a few hours ago recognized by the European Parliament as a terrorist state, that their main aim is to make us desperate, and so that we just flee from our country, so that we give up. But we think that exactly for this reason, we have to be strong, we have to be powerful. They don't want us to have present, let alone future. But we are here today exactly to talk about our future, not only how to rebuild our energy sector, but also how to include women in this sector, how to make it beneficial. And for this reason, I really am happy once again to welcome all of you on our discussion panel, Ensuring Gender and Climate Sensitive Financing for Green Recovery, of the 4th Annual Conference of Women Energy Club. And we had incredible panels already yesterday and today, other panels of our annual conference. And we talked about how to cooperate with our European partners, how to make it more environment in energy sector more inclusive. And also just yesterday, after 10 years since the European Commission proposal, it will be now in place a law, EU law for gender equality on company boards. So we understand that this topic is really hot. It's not only hot, but important. And just some statistics, every year we have this conference, every year we bring up some statistics, but I think it's really important to raise awareness. And once again, to say that diverse teams have been found to make decisions 60% faster than non-diverse teams. And if more human diversity is included in the business, it will benefit society as a whole. So we will talk today about how to invest responsibly, to reflect not only as one says ESG goals, but just climate investment, climate goals, and also gender balance consideration. And at this panel, we would like to bring the challenges we face and the real need to accelerate action on climate change and gender equality into sharp focus. And first of all, I would like to introduce speakers we have today. It's Liane Shalatek, Associate Director of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, Washington, and she is also part of the CSO Active Observer team. And currently her work focuses on international climate finance with an emphasis on public climate finance flows and on equitable access to climate funding. And a special consideration of her current work is addressing the gender dimension of climate change. including in respect to finance. We have also on board Laura Piosan, Deputy Director General, Project Directorate of the European Investment Bank, and she is currently also in charge and responsible for for due diligence of investments in R&D intensive sectors, which I think is really important, and also like it brings us this experience in so-called, like as it used to be said, man's world, and we are here like not to prove. We don't have to prove anything to anyone, just to show that it's not a man's world. It just like it's beneficial for all of us to collaborate here. We have Franziska Hanna Deininger, gender and climate consultant of the IFC World Bank Group. And honestly, Franziska, I have to admit that I'm admired, I'm really excited to see that we have within banks that we have this kind of positions, and this means exactly this perfect combination of gender and climate. And you are here for us, and I've seen that you are very active at conferences, and just recently you also took part in another conference, and we were talking about what more can we do to place gender equity at the heart of climate action. And I'm also very much excited to hear about what you can tell us about solutions that international financial institutions can bring up. We also have, I understand that we couldn't have here no, we have Alexei Savin from Ukrgas Bank, and Alexei, thank you so much for being here. He's head of ecological projects within Ukrgas Bank. It's Ukraine, and Ukrgas Bank is a leading bank in financing projects of sustainable projects in Ukraine. They are the ones because myself as a lawyer also, I'm working a lot on renewable energy projects, and in most cases, if not in 95% of cases, our clients are dealing exactly with Ukrgas Bank, and I'm really happy and proud, and patriotic side, that we do have this kind of bank, and really modern and green bank in Ukraine. And also, once again, Alexei, thank you so much for joining us, because as mentioned, we have very turbulent day today, lots of attacks, lots of problems with connection with everything. So you're our personal hero, our hero for being here, and also for supporting Women Energy Club and making our panel diverse. We have also with us Birgit Leoden, who is founder and chief mermaid, the Ocean Opportunity Lab. She is all the way from Norway, and she's a self-made entrepreneur who has worked to push sustainability, entrepreneurship, next generation diversity across the maritime industry for almost 15 years. And she's currently building this tool, the Ocean Opportunity Lab. I guess that Birgit will tell us a little bit more about this instrument. And she's super active in terms of sustainability, in terms of promotion of gender equality. And once again, I'm thrilled to hear about all your initiatives. And also we have Anya Spanos, who I personally met during the other conference, Women Energized Women, this year in May in Munich. And I'm very happy that you are here with us today. She's managing director at Recap Global Investors from Switzerland. She's also director at 4 Energy Operation Maintenance Company. She's a team lead of the asset management and managing director for the solar power and wind farms with more than 1 gigawatt installed capacity in 7 countries in Europe. And also, Anya is also an ambassador of Women in Energy Sphere, and she's a board of V1 community, Women of New Energies Association in Hamburg. So even announcing and introducing the speakers we have today, I think I'm already very happy that we managed to gather all of you today. And we are limited in time, and I took lots of time just to introduce you, but we have to know our heroes. And let me please start this discussion with the first question to Liana Shalatek. Could you please just zoom out based on your experience? How is financing aligned with gender and decarbonization goals? What are the international climate initiatives that are happening nowadays? Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you to everybody for including me there. I'm deeply honored again. Just wanna reinforce what everybody said about the spirit and the power and the forward-looking optimism of the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian women. I think you are the force to be reckoned with. and really critical for green recovery. And I will be as much in a listening and learning mode as hopefully able to contribute a couple of thoughts. So just starting off, protecting, promoting and advancing human rights, including gender equality, and combating the discrimination based on gender is an obligation of all countries, Ukraine included, and Ukraine has been ratifying CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination of All Forms Against Women in 1981, and has actually acted against that. And so gender equality and the empowerment of women matter in all contexts. And I think the Russian aggression that you are discussing and actually suffering right now shows that we have gender differentiated impacts from, for example, the loss of energy. And gender-based discrimination and barriers that include and that are really important are the informality of work, wage and non-wage gaps. We have lack of access to finance and financial services, and I'm really excited that we are going to talk about that, lack of access to information, lack of property, legal rights and decision-making. And women are the ones, due to societal and gender roles, including reproductive and underpaid or unpaid care work, that are actually very often acting as the social safety net of last resort. We see that in war efforts, we see that in recovery efforts. And so it's really important to focus on the different energy access demands that women and diverse gender groups have. And this is why this has to be at the forefront of actually talking about reconstruction and planning. Some of the experience of climate finance, so your question, so how much climate finance or finance for the energy transition is currently aligned with gender and the decarbonization goals, what's happening? To be quite honest, the short answer is we really don't know exactly, because there is no required tracking and accounting of the gender responsiveness of decarbonization efforts. There's very little detailed gender reporting available of climate finance, for example, provided and received. And you see that, for example, when you look, and I'm starting with public finance because that's the one where I'm mostly involved in, when you're actually looking at the OECD countries that provide public climate finance and report to the OECD, both on the real markers and then on the gender equality markers, which is actually the subslice of climate finance that is best accounted and tracked for. We see that basically 2/3 of the finance provided does not even report on gender. A third does report on gender, but only 1.5% of the finance, the climate finance that reports on gender, actually indicates that it has a principal focus on both climate change and on gender equality. So this is obviously a big problem, that we don't have a lot of tracking and accuracy. And I think that lack of accurate tracking and monitoring is part of the old adage, what is not counted does not count, which means it shows the continued lack of adequate gender disaggregated data in climate finance, and that hampers efforts to assure that the financing that we have, that the scarce financing that we have, and that the scarce public financing that we have, that has that effort of mobilizing and catalyzing other financial flows and shifting markets, cannot be used as efficient, effective, and equitable as we need it to be. So there's a long way to go. Now, when you look at some of the experiences of climate funds, which is again, the way that I'm engaging mostly, most now have gender policies, they have gender action plans. So on a project level, you see actually that there are proponents required to articulate gender specific actions. However, when you come to implementation, it's unfortunately a completely different story. We see that a lot of those gender action plans are underfunded. Very often you have, for example, a consultant that is brought in rather than drawing and lifting up the local experience. This is really crucial because obviously women and gender experts within the country know best what is needed. So while there are some efforts on the project level, we see still continued shortcomings in integrating what is called the women and gender machinery, that, for example, relevant commissions, relevant ministries, but also women and gender organizations in actually planning and sector planning, larger plans. So, for example, Ukraine in its updated NDC does make mention of women and gender participation in elaborating its NDCs, but the same kind of effort is needed when you are looking at reconstruction, rebuilding efforts, that you actually bring the experience of women, of gender groups, of feminist groups very early into the process. Maybe just a couple of points with respect to public sector financing for decarbonization. Again, there's an important role for the public sector to address still some of the risk returns perception, or rather often misperception of renewable energy technologies, despite the cost competitiveness that renewable energies has versus fossil fuel-based energies. We see that the public finance provision is often biased towards large-scale solution, primarily for energy provision commercially versus over household use and household activities. So issues of household level needs, affordability of access, including cross-subsidization that might be necessary, is often not sufficiently addressed. We also need to, and that's from a gender and feminist perspective, look at what is often termed false solutions. So some of the net zero pitfalls that are actually violation of human rights when you are, for example, looking at geoengineering technologies. And if you want to actually have that energy transition, it's important to not just set on net zero, but on real zero. And lastly, maybe a couple of thoughts, and I know all of our other panels have much more experience than I have with respect to private sector engagement. There, obviously, women entrepreneurs, women-led and women-owned businesses are usually overrepresented in the micro and small business sector. However, we see that the biggest challenge for women in the MSME sector is actually access to capital. We know globally, and I don't know what the numbers in Ukraine are, but I'm pretty sure your colleagues can tell us that women receive just a really small minority part there. So it's really important that, to the extent that public finance comes in, that concessionality of public finance provided is then passed on as subsidies, financial support to women entrepreneurs and customers, for example, as easily accessible green credit lines for highly concessional, patient, small-scale loans, where we need to avoid that subsidy capture is happening on the intermediary level. So, for example, by local financial institutions, we need risk guarantees for small-scale loans, including to reduce the need and the size of collateral. We need to buy down interest rates and increase the maturity of small-scale loans. And I think this is really important, lastly, we also need some grant finance provision to commercial and public lenders with the focus on the capacity building of loan officers and the provision of non-financial services to address gender-specific climate finance and knowledge gaps. So that's basically from my experience in engaging with climate finance, particularly, and related decarbonization efforts. Back to you, and thank you for the opportunity to join.
Thank you so much, Leanne, personally myself, for this overview, for this overarching of the situation. And some data is definitely disappointing to some extent, but we have to have this data. And this is important issue what you have mentioned, like what is not counted is not counted for, doesn't count. And we have to start like to raise awareness. And in order to have something to discuss, we really have to have this index. And also, thank you so much for just naming all this, even like practical instruments and where the problem lies, including that also based on our experience that women are more engaged in these small projects rather than large ones. And I would like to continue this discussion and to also ask Laura and Francisca with regard to what are the specific ways that development finance institutions and international finance institutions can provide green financing and close the gender gap. So let me please start with Laura, and could you please give us your opinion and your experience with regard to this?
Thank you very much, Marina, and I'm very honored to be part of this interesting panel. And let me start by saying that even if it is a small thing that you're doing now, continuing with the panel, regardless of the situation, is an act of heroism. And I truly believe that every Ukrainian behaves like a true hero. And for this reason, our support must be unwavering. And as the EU Bank, the EIB Investment Bank, remains unshakable. And we have stood, we continue to stand with Ukraine, and we are committed to the nation's recovery. And here today, the reason why I think it's very important is I also am a true believer that the path we are discussing today, the green and gender inclusive recovery, is the way to go. No, is the way to go for the reconstruction, which must and we must support you every step of the way. So thank you very much for inviting to this panel, and thank you for the for these questions about the instruments. Now, the European Investment Bank is a financing institution, so the instruments that we put in are financial instruments. Now, we are committed to climate, we are committed to gender. And I think the first step in this commitment is having policies that are supportive to this direction. So from our side, we are, as the EU Climate Bank, we have committed to have all our financing aligned with the Paris Agreement. We are committing to deliver at least 50% of our financing to green investments. And finally, we have committed to mobilize 1 trillion of investment in climate action and environmental sustainability between 2020 and 2030, so the critical decade. To do so, commitment is important. It is important to have a roadmap. So we have a Climate Bank roadmap. And have enshrined these commitments in our policies, in our procedures, and in our environmental, social, and governance standard. So we have a solid base from which to, fund our financing and our financial instruments. Similarly to this, we have a dedicated gender strategy and a strong gender mainstreaming approach. So commitments, but as our previous speaker mentioned, it's also important to track and report transparently about what we are doing, because we need to be able to count and make these gender and climate elements count by doing so very, very transparently. Now, we discussed earlier, and you mentioned the importance, these two objectives, climate and gender, are not opposing each other, are not separate from each other, and are in fact, they work together, they are synergic, and we aim to reflect with two common objectives in all our policies. This is, for example, Marina, I hope you're still there.
I'm still here.
Okay,
Sorry
okay.
for my technical issues. But I'm here. I'm all in all attention.
Sorry, Maria. You just disappeared momentarily.
No, I'm here.
Okay, so I think what I mentioned is that climate and gender needs to be enshrined in all our policies. So we have recently approved a strategic approach to fragility and conflict, where in this different context of fragility and conflict, where of course you can recognize your economy, we often see that climate change and conflict are in a mutually reinforcing relations, where conflict worsens climate change impact, and climate change is often triggering the conflict. Now, this was very evident in the Ukrainian pavilions at COP, which I had the pleasure and honor to visit and to participate a panel at, where it was really showing the impact that conflict has on climate and on environment in Ukraine, amongst all the rest. Another example of policy where we put these two elements in is the just transition. And again, it is important to plan the transformation and the transition of the economy in a way that are all inclusive. There is either a just transition or there is no transition. So when we are looking for instance, coal producing regions or heavy industry regions, we need to have in place an approach, and we do have an approach within the European Union to support the economies and to support the vulnerabilities of economies, the reskilling, and indeed the growth of the economy. Now, I mentioned which tools do we have. I mentioned the financial support. I think what creates additionality in our action, and this has been particularly true in the past also for Ukraine, is that we can also provide substantial technical assistance, so advisory services to our promoter to help to shape the investment projects to the highest standard possible, to help to shape the policies and the capacities that enable these investments in a way that indeed, as I mentioned, green and environmentally sustainable and gender inclusive. So I leave you on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I'm putting notes on all of your speakerships and all of your just pieces of advice, which are really precious for us. And myself, I think, as a lawyer, what really matters is that at the beginning we have some kind of obligation in order to follow. And what I see is also it works because you have mentioned that European Investment Bank is trying to follow in its investment strategies all of those goals that are set in international agreements and also including in Paris Agreement. And that is where actually we can start with. And at first you have something like obligation, and then it becomes also already natural. And what also matters is, as you said, to plan the transformation. And I would say this is really important in terms of everything, and it should be integral. Plan the transformation of the sector itself, and also plan how in this transformation the matter of inclusivity will be and matter of gender equality will be. And this is where we have to start with. Thank you so much, Laura, and I would really like to give the floor to Francisca in order to give also us some overview of international financial institutions and IFC with regard to this and your personal experience, and how active this kind of I don't know whether it's a department or it's only a position of consultants on gender and climate is, but I will once again repeat that I'm really happy to see that we have already those kind of positions within international financial institutions. Please, the floor is yours, Francisca.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much. I mean, I will just come after my colleagues here to just say I'm truly in awe that you're still hosting the session and despite the challenges. And it's, I don't know, sometimes we're speaking about these challenges, and I think it just puts, gender, fragility, energy, it just puts it a bit more into perspective, given the ongoing situation. So I just want to say that as well to you, and I think it's been a great session so far, despite all of the challenges. So yeah, maybe I'll quickly answer your question about where I sit and what I do. So I'm part of IFC, and IFC is of course part of the World Bank Group, focused on private sector development. So we really invest in the private sector primarily, and IFC essentially invests both in financial institutions, so your banks, your microfinance institutes, your insurance providers, but then we also directly invest in companies, so in emerging markets. And the primary objective along both lines is really to provide financing solutions that would otherwise be unavailable or maybe not attractive, but also with driving co-benefits on sustainability, climate, and gender. Now that's what IFC does as a big institute, and within that I sit in the Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. And as of 6 months ago, I'm leading this new gender and climate work stream. So it's a small team right now, but we hope that the work will become important enough to pull in more resources towards this kind of dualistic objective of gender and climate. And I'll get to that a bit and what that means for us. But I think there is such an increased focus on climate and green recovery. And I think for us as the gender group, and why this team has come to fruition is that there's really a risk that as we invest in climate projects or green projects, that gender is left behind. So that these projects, whether it's an infrastructure or through financial institutions, that it widens gender gaps. And there's various reasons for this, but beyond the usual suspects of crisis situations tend to perpetuate gender gaps and widen them, but also in other areas. Women and girls are less represented in STEM fields. They are less likely to be present in sectors such as renewable energy, traditional male-dominated sectors, and they're unlikely to really benefit also from the opportunities that are created as we rebuild in a greener and more environmentally sustainable way. So there's this real risk that we see from the gender perspective here. Now, how do we actually address this then? How do we ensure that gender is not left behind? And the approach differs a bit based on, if we're looking at working through a bank or a financial intermediary. We've really been focusing a lot on the growth of green bonds, sustainability bonds, and also more recently gender bonds, which is still an undiscovered space, but it's growing in terms of at least interest in the issuance of gender bonds. And while this is really exciting and it shows growing interest for banks to really finance projects that are targeting green infrastructure or green buildings or renewable energy, and on the other side finance opportunities for women SMEs and increase financing for women, we still largely see them as kind of separate, right? So we have a green bond and a gender bond, and there's not a big conversation happening yet on how to actually integrate those two. And I'll maybe speak a bit hypothetically and a bit aspirationally on what this could look like, because we don't have so many examples yet, but one option that we see is as we mature in the green bond space, actually creating carve-outs to support, green projects that are, that are founded or run by women, or that have, a critical threshold of women on their board of directors. So creating those entry points within green financing, which is growing quite a bit, to also promote women in those spaces is one really big opportunity that we see in this space. Then when it comes to more direct investments, when we actually work with specific companies, in particular in infrastructure, the gender group is really looking beyond a risk management perspective. So it's far beyond the do no harm approach, kind of ticking the boxes on do no harm. It's really working with the clients, understanding their willingness, their appetites, and also to push them a bit on these gender outcomes. And here we're talking about employing women in their supply chains, employing women and training them into technical roles. And this is really critical for especially green sectors, because we already see a skills gap and a talent gap emerging between men and women, or not emerging, it's already there. And, really pushing them to think about where they can really have an impact on gender through their green projects or through the green financing that we're providing to them. So those are kind of the efforts that we see. That's the direction that we're heading. It's still challenging, especially when we think about integrating these two priorities on gender and climate, because, I think there's acknowledgement that they're both important, but there's still a bit of a fight going on between the two in terms of, which one is more important, what needs to be prioritized. And that's really where I want to go back to Laura's comment also on the need to present these objectives as really symbiotic, as really working together. And there's growing evidence to support this. So it's not just about shifting the mindset, it's also about awareness raising and really pushing also the evidence base to support this integration on gender and climate. I want to just close. I know I've been speaking for quite a while, so I want to close with also just repositioning this kind of bigger debate into the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, because I think, we're still in the middle of it. And it's so great that we're already thinking about reconstruction. But as part of that, we need to be thinking about the humanitarian crisis that is still ongoing. And there's a recent UN report that has already demonstrated that this war has had outsized impacts on women and girls, whether it comes to women, foregoing food, growing experience of sexual and domestic violence. So we're already seeing the kind of, I don't want to call them classic, but the kind of repetitive ongoing crises that are typical, whether it's Ukraine or other conflict settings or during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's really, really important that we think about this as we reconstruct. We need to address those gender gaps, and we need to push forward and actually advance women in those green spaces as well. So yeah, I will stop there, and again, very appreciative to be part of such a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franziska. I'm really, it was very interesting for me to hear, not only because it was a topic during lots of webinars, conferences, green bonds. And I'm happy to hear now we have even this new instrument, gender bonds. And I understand, as you said, that we don't have that many examples yet, but it doesn't mean that we cannot be the one, the driver of those examples that could be created. And actually, that is why all of us are here. That is why we are having this discussion. Even when, as you said, what we are experiencing in Ukraine, it's not only the crisis, it's the war. It's the war where not even one country we're now analyzing, no country in the world has ever experienced that attack on energy infrastructure. And also, as you mentioned, women are normally more exposed to climate changes, to all this kind of energy sensitive topics, not only as professionals, but also just as females. But anyway, talking about this, it's also important to see the overview, what is happening in the world, where we are aiming at, what is our homework, but it's also important to understand what is being done in Ukraine. And once again, I'm really happy that we have here Alexei Savin with us, who is head of ecological projects of Ukrgazbank. And I will repeat it again and again. Alexei, you are our hero. Thank you so much for being connected here, for being with us. Also it is during the previous panels, we have also talked that it's very, very crucial, not to say that women are against men or men are against women. We are together. We have to collaborate. It's for benefit of all of us. And we are happy to have you here. And I know that Ukrgazbank has financed more than about 200, if I'm not mistaken, big projects in sustainable energy. You are cooperating also in terms of the sustainable due diligence and everything even with IFC. You have lots and lots of initiatives. So my question to you is ensuring gender and climate sensitive financing. Are those already on the agenda of Ukrainian banks? Or at least, if not all Ukrainian banks, for sure, speaking about one of the most sustainable and leader in green banks, Ukrgazbank. And I know you also are now discussing some new projects, new initiatives. So I'm very much excited to hear about this. And please, over to you, Alexei.
Okay, hello, thank you for this presentation. Thank you for the invitation to this very important event, I think. In Ukraine, this topic is not popular now, but I think such kind of event helps Ukrainian society raise this necessity. But unfortunately, nowadays in Ukraine, we often have blackouts. So 2 hours ago in Kiev, about 5 kilometers near me, was damaged our power plants. And now I saw the news and that the damage to energy facilities is much wider and all territory of Ukraine, and now several nuclear plants are disconnected from the power grid, and we don't know what will be tomorrow. And so maybe complete and long blackout can be at any moment, maybe after 5 minutes, maybe after 1 day. So I didn't have enough time to prepare my speech in English, so I apologize, but I will continue my speech in Ukraine, and I was sure that there would be an English translation of this event, so maybe I ask you, Marina, to translate my speech for other participants of this event, okay? Sorry,
Yes,
and
that's
so
No
yes, I
worries.
continue by Ukrainian. Так. And how long I can tell that you can translate me? One or two sentences, maybe. Okay. Okay. So by Ukrainian. Мабуть, ви вже всі
Probably you know Ukrgazbank. Thank you for introducing us, because we cooperate with IFC as well as EIB. Few words about the bank. In the year 2016, we have defined as our priority and the main strategy financing of the environmental projects.
So thank you for introduction, and as probably some of you know, that Ukrgazbank is cooperating with IFC and with EIB. And back in 2016, Ukrgazbank has also identified as one of the main strategies is to finance ecological projects and to be ecological bank.
Так, і вже на початок
And at
2020
the beginning of the year 2020, we have financed over 20 billion hryvnia of such projects, financial projects, mostly the projects of renewable energy in every direction of renewable energy, solar, wind, hydropower plants, biomass, and biogas.
More than 200 billion in hryvnias projects. Those are in renewables, including solar, wind, biomass, biogas.
Да, але у 2020
However, in the year 2020, before the year 2020, we became the largest Ukrainian bank for financing of the alternative energy. Every fourth megawatt in Ukraine was introduced with financing from Ukrgazbank.
In 2020, Ukrgazbank became one of the biggest banks in Ukraine that is financing alternative energy projects. And in 2020, each fourth megawatt of renewable capacity that are constructed in Ukraine was also constructed by financial support and engagement of Ukrgazbank.
Але 2020 рік
However, the year 2020 changed both for Ukraine and worldwide the entire perception. And we understood that the financing of just environmental and resource-saving projects is not sufficient.
2020, Ukraine, same as the world, have understood that everything has changed. And we understood for ourselves, we realized that to finance only ecological projects is not enough.
Да. Бо головне завдання нашого екологічного
Because the main task of our environmental financing was focused with final implementation was improvement of health and longevity of people.
Ecological department of our bank was to extend the life cycle of people in general and their health.
Да. А ми передивилися наші критерії.
And we have looked into our criteria of eligibility, and we have added the direction of financing of healthcare, organic products, water purification, waste management.
We have also added to our portfolio projects in medicine, healthcare, in sewage waters, also like waste management projects.
Да. І для прикладу тільки
And
за
for the example, just in 2020-2021, we could provide for medical projects over 300 billion hryvnia, which is about 10 million euro as a former exchange rate.
So in 2020-2021, we have financed about 10 million euro projects in healthcare sphere.
да. І ці проекти були
And
направлені
those projects were focused at all the economic sectors, from the small medical offices up to the large district hospitals.
Were financed, they were from all kind of sectors, starting from small private cabinets and also like big hospitals.
Да. Але у 2022
However, in the year 2022, in Ukraine, there was not just COVID, it was a much worse threat, which was the war, and it changed our mentality even more.
In Ukraine, not only COVID, but we have experienced full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and we have war, and it has totally changed the strategy of the and vision of the bank.
Да. І часто працюючи в цьому році
Quite often, while working this year under the shelling with no water and no electricity, we understood that the matters that we raised before, which is environmental or medical, yet are not sufficient or even impossible unless we include such matters as financing of social and management projects known as ESG.
What we have understand that working under bomb shelling, under rocket shelling, often without water, without electricity or gas supply, we have realized that financing ecological or only healthcare projects is not enough. And we have also to focus and take into account so-called ESG priorities. So also financing social kind of projects.
Да, і прямо зараз підрозділ, який я
Right
очолюю,
now, the unit I'm the head of in Ukrgazbank is involved in development and localization of the global methods of evaluation of ESG projects for Ukrainian realities.
Right now, the department that I'm heading is developing and trying to adjust ESG standards that are used worldwide to adjust those in Ukraine.
я маю надію, що вже у наступному
I
році
have the hope that next year we can provide financing for such projects. Recently, we spoke with representatives of UNICEF about their experience of financing of projects focused on support of women, managers and owners of businesses.
And I hope that next year we will be able to finance already this kind of ESG projects. And we have also talked already and discussed this with UNICEF on kind of project that have the aim financing women, financing projects to support women as leaders, as owners of business.
Тому я маю надію, що разом з нашими іноземними
Therefore, I have the hope that together with our international partners, as early as next year or in 2024, when there will be the end of the war, we shall prepare special loan programs to support women in business.
By next year, or at least by 2024, we will be able, together with our foreign partners, to provide loan programs that are aimed at this strategy, at this ESG priorities and supporting women.
Да, ми розуміємо, що після
We
нашої
understand that after our victory in Ukraine, there will be only one chance to become the leading global country, is to make restoration of the economics and the social life only with all the principles of ESG.
After the win of Ukraine, we have only one chance to be a leading country rebuilding, and we have only one chance to rebuild our economy with modern principles, including ESG principles.
Да, тільки після цього ми зможемо
Only after that we shall be able to integrate with European zone, not only as a country which requires a lot of support, but actually as the equal player of the market.
Integrate into European community and join European community not only as a country that is all the time requiring support, financial donations, but also as an equal partner that is also compliant with ESG principles.
Да, для цього мають бути сучасні
For
локальні
that, we require modern local financial institutions in Ukraine that will correspond to European standards, will speak the same understandable language with the same principles. And we are confident that Ukrgazbank will be the leading bank, which will be the agent bank for other international organizations inside the country.
I hope that in a while after that, modern local institutions that comply with European standards, they will be in collaboration with us, and we will speak same language, and Ukrgazbank will be the one that will be leading this direction, and we will be leading this strategy.
Так, у додаток до попередньої такої глобальної
In
інформації,
addition to the previous information, I would like to mention that the bank is not just financing our projects. This is also our own experience, and we have a lot to show, because as we began to develop as a green bank together with IFC, we began to implement social standards also inside the bank.
And we like adding to this global information. I want to say that Ukrgazbank is not only like financing projects, but has also like its own experience. And we became as this green bank social, and we have also our experience to share.
да, в принципі, загальновідомо,
Generally, it's known that in Ukraine, the number of women in the banks, including Ukrgazbank, exceeds 60%. And we are trying to create comfortable conditions of work for everyone, including gender equality, a clear hierarchy, and transparent communications amongst the personnel, with no problems of communications due to their gender.
And as you may know, in Ukraine and also in Ukrgazbank, we have more than 60% of women employees. And we are aiming at creating comfort conditions for all without any, to make it gender balanced and to comply with gender equality standards and to create clear and transparent communication between all the personnel of Ukrgazbank.
Да, і це реалізовується не тільки
And this
через
is implemented through both prescribing the methodologies, and also we provide training for the personnel, which is a mandatory part of development of the bank. We are using different methods of remote education, as well as support of the auditors E&Y, including assessment of the risks inside the bank and only among the clients.
Some study courses for our employees. We do it remotely, we do it offline, we do some audits, we are also monitoring social risks.
Ну, в принципі, це такі загальні питання, які хотів.
Those are the general matters I intended to discuss. I would like to thank for the invitation. I hope that we shall see each other at the next events.
Thank you so much. I understand you understand it in English, right? Or like
Yes,
okay, great.
I understand, but my own speech is not so good.
No worries at all. No worries at all. And thank you so much. It was really inspiring. I mean, I was at some point focused more like on translations and on or more on perception of information, because some information is also new to me. And I'm very happy that Ukrgazbank, same as us today actually, is not only working. And I know that you have portfolio of all those renewable capacities that are like damaged, that stopped producing electricity, that are like influenced and negatively impacted by the Russian war in Ukraine. But at the same time, you're managing not only to cope with those kind of clients, like to do restructuring, refinancing or something like this, but you are also thinking about the future. You're also cooperating with international partners. And I think this is really amazing what you're doing. Personally, myself, like I'm very inspired and I'm proud of what you are doing. And believe me, we will be ambassadors even more of Ukrgazbank, and I'm proud that in Ukraine we also have this kind of initiatives. And you have mentioned about like the projects that you are gonna think about how to finance projects where women are participating. And today we are having on board Birgit Leoden, who, thank you so much. You have joined like the very last minute invitation you got, but I'm very happy that we have you on board. And you are, as mentioned, like from Norway, and we know that Scandinavian countries, they are really leading in terms of gender equality. And I've seen some data that when it comes to advancing gender equality, Norway is ranked number 2 in the Global Gender Gap Index by the World Economic Forum. And I'm really, personally, I'm surprised how active you are and how you manage to be participating in all these kind of activities. And I've recently attended, like I was in Norway, and I've attended some kind of startups, some kind of public institutions. And I talked to Norwegian Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, and Zoe told me that you were also some time ago in Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken. So you visited Ukraine. Thank you so much for that. And I would really love to ask you, could you please tell us more about your experience as to ensuring gender and climate sensitive financing and create successful business cases during crisis? I know that you have like the tool you have created, it was during crisis, like COVID crisis, like this oil crisis, financial crisis. In Ukraine, we have, as mentioned, not just crisis, we have a war, so it's even worse. But like your experience of creating something new, of incentivizing people like to pay attention to this topic and creating something tangible, this is what also we are looking for. So please, floor is yours. And yeah.
Thank you. And I just wanted, because it's I think it's a very like strong and special day to be sitting with you today. And I can't in no way fathom how you are, so strong, resilient. So I also wanted, since it's going to be broadcasted later, I wanted to also just start with the more personal greeting. So I will try my best. Not sure if it's that good, but Дорогі відважні українські друзі, моє серце і думки.
Dear Ukrainian friends, we are supporting you. Our thoughts are with you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you very much indeed, Brigitte.
So I have some very good, strong female friends from Ukraine that I've known for a very long time. And I think that we can't in no way compare the crisis that we've working through over the years that I've been working in maritime with what you're going through now. But what I do really wanted to kind of start with here is that I think that there are many negative effects of the lack of diverse inclusion in our society, in our governments, and also in the business sector. And I do believe that what we need as we are moving towards a zero emission, clean future is that we have to ensure that a clean future environmentally also needs to be inclusive. It needs to be built on empathic leadership, on system redesign, and we need the social and human inclusion going hand in hand with environmental sustainability. Nobody can be left behind. We need to build a society that is good for the majority and every one of us. And I think in many ways, this is what has made me also so dedicated and very fortunate to be allowed to work with amazing women and men around the world, focusing on the clean shift in the blue and the green industries, really. I always say, in general, it is in the crisis that we also start building the future. But then if we're going to build the right future, then it means that women need to own, women need to lead, women need to be entrepreneurs, women needs to be invested in. And also women needs to collaborate with each other and with men beyond borders, across cultures, and across also the sectors that we are depending on. I also believe that the opportunity space we have ahead as we are going, all of us, to help support rebuilding Ukraine after terrible terrorist Putin being thrown out again, hopefully soon rather than later, is that we are definitely going to be seeing now, I think, the first real opportunity to democratize the access to clean energy. And I think that is important. And coming from an oil-producing country that has built our fortune on dirty fuels, dirty energy, that has also created a very strong imbalance in the world, because you have the petroleum countries and then you have the non-petroleum countries. Whereas when it comes to clean renewable energy, we can properly redistribute the local small grid, off-grid, the community build energy infrastructure. We can build breathing energy grids. We can make sure that we give the power back to people, and also to the smaller countries, to the bigger countries. It doesn't matter anymore. So I think this is the most exciting part that I look for in the future. But then it also requires, I think, that we are in it, that we are redesigning this actively. So as you mentioned, I've spent many years. I started working at 16, and I spent many years working for gender equality and the clean shift and entrepreneurship. And what we launched last week, we did the first launch of the global 100 inspirational female entrepreneurs across ocean and energy sectors. And what is really, really nice, an amazing woman that I have been admiring for years is the first that we featured in that list, that is Inna Braverman, who is an Ukrainian entrepreneur. She comes from Israel. She dedicated her life to work on renewable energy because she all just barely survived Chernobyl many, many years ago. And I think the likes of her and us gathered here today have the power and the potential to change the future and to design a future that we want to live in, and also the one where we want to bring our kids up in. So I think that where we are digital, so as long as you are not losing power too much now with the shelling and everything, we are still able to work together. We are still able to work smart and find solutions and empower each other while you go through war and attacks. So I think my invitation from our end in Tool would be definitely that now when we are building these global initiatives to connect female entrepreneurs, also mapping out who are the investors, the resources that are there to support and finance female entrepreneurs, the big players that are supporting and building up female leader and board capacities, then we have to make sure that we really now include and connect much stronger also with our Ukrainian sisters through this, because then only we can make sure that we can accelerate out of this tragedy and build it into something better. So, but I do think that, I think this is also proving to us we can no longer depend on oil, and also we cannot depend on some regimes that are led by strong men of the history behind us. They should be left in history. They can no longer be the people and the regimes that we depend on energy-wise. So now I think the whole security, democratizing energy, and also democratizing the access for women to take charge in leading the future and co-creating it with men is really essential. And I do think that we have all the opportunities, and it will be tough. But I think the strength in this is when we are in it together, working shoulder by shoulder, mobilizing our best capacities and capabilities.
Thank you so much, Birgit. It was really inspiring. And what I've heard from you is really important. Would like to repeat this. We have to build society that is good for a majority. And just this morning, we had another session of our annual conference. And what one of our members of the parliament of Ukraine, she has raised the topic also that we are often saying that women have the problem of like working, for example, because they have kids. And she said like that basically it's not only women who have kids, but the same like men do have kids. And what we have, like what idea we have to bring up is that we have to, first of all, build this family-oriented society, right? So irrespective of which gender we are, it has to be like really favorable to create favorable conditions for both genders. And also what is important, like again, this was I think mentioned during the first panel of the conference, is that mostly women are those who are working and promoting decarbonization, and at the same time, men are those that are adopting political decisions, including in terms like of decarbonization. And this is where this system, like the idea, is unbalanced itself. And that's where we have to really promote this idea of also including how to engage more women in financing and how to create more financial, like more projects, business projects where like women are leading. And
if I could just add a small comment, I also think that, this is a matter of both when it comes to energy, but our general society structures, they were designed for the former generation, and that still affects us. So I think in my life, both of my companies are built up with babies or very small kids. And I think where we need to go is also to liberate ourselves from the old-fashioned systems and then redesign so that it works for our current generation. And I would give a voice for the not work-life balance, but work-family fusion, basically.
Wow, I will write it down. Thank you so much for this. This is really important comment what you have added and really inspiring. And also talking about strong women in business that have created business cases, that are leading business cases. I would also like to come over to Anya's panels. And as mentioned, we have met with Anya during Women Energized Women Conference in Munich in May. And I was really impressed, and I could feel from the early beginning that she's really very strong and powerful woman, at the same time being tender and family oriented and really nice. And I'm amused how much you can balance, how you have like with this impressive career in a traditionally male dominated space. And talking about this private sector, about recap that, and about the company where you are working and leading, and it has declared ESG commitment and promotes sustainability throughout the whole value chain, and is obviously dealing with many more green sustainable projects. So based on your experience, Anya, how much companies care nowadays that the financing is not only climate but also gender sensitive? And probably tell us about your personal experience, how you manage like to be that strong, to be leading, irrespective of like, despite anything or thanks to something.
Yes, thank you very much, and I was really very appreciated that you wrote me to be here in the panel. And I say hello to especially everybody who is attending and listening to our panel and is interested in these issues, and will maybe in the later stage have the stream to look at. I'm strong. Maybe I'm a leading in the industry, in the branch that I made my career so far, but I'm also sensitive and frightened sometimes. So I'm just a normal person, as I think everybody of us. And I think what it takes is the courage to just go ahead and to work on solution and to find your own path and to be in line with what you like. And speaking for Recap, we operate like nowadays 1 gigawatt that we built up in one decade from wind and solar power farm that we operate for in a buy and hold strategy for like 20 or 30 years, as long as lifetime for these plants is possible. What we do here is as a operator for institutional investors, we are linked to the financing industry, or we are kind of intermediate between the financing industry, the investors who are giving their equity into bonds, and we are investing those into renewable energy projects at the current stage throughout 7 countries in Europe. And this brings us to the other side, all the service providers dealing for this operation. And so what we are mostly afraid of is the sun and the wind to be there in sufficient amount. So this is actually our, first of all, this is where all our business case is based on. And this is something that we see here. We heard before that small projects are linked to women. And what we have with the renewable energy, we don't have the problem of the resource, because it's still, it's there. We have wind not on every location the same way, but still there's the wind coming from nobody. It's just something that is given. The same is with the sun, and so we don't have any dependencies in corporates, in nations, and we have the possibility with renewable energies to have small projects, but to also have big projects. And talking about the Ukraine and the rebuilding of the energy infrastructure for the future, we have the possibility to link both, to have decentral small invest projects that are then again linked more to female initiatives, but we also will have, driven by the corporates and the government, the big projects that is power to whatever, hydro energy or others, to have a constant energy supply that is sufficient for our digital industry that we are now, or society, that we have constant energy flow to everybody. It is a given fact that we are saying that we are in the energy sector or in the man's world, but it's also true that we made it ourselves the way it is. That is, it's something that came from the past, where men were responsible for the family and the women were responsible for the families. And now, Maya, that's exactly what you said. We need to base it on families. And this means that we don't support women, but to support the man to take the time with the kids. Because what we had in the past, the man was the responsible person for the family, and the women was to take care of this of the kids and the whole family. That bring a situation that women stands for impact and for empathy, and that men are for economics, math, and so we made kind of stereotypes that we divide society in, and we need to change these stereotypes and to show that it can be done together. And I think that's something that changes a lot in the past, when we saw in the digital world that, for especially speaking for the German-speaking regions, that men are also taking 4 days and not 100% job because they want to have 1 day with the kids, and that this is okay, and this is not insane in the economical perspective. That makes a difference, because then they take 4 days, the women may take 4 days as well, and then you have 3 days for childcare, and then it sounds like something that is suitable and economically sensible, but still you have to earn enough money to raise the families. This is for the family perspective. And now coming to ESG question that you raised with the UN global goals in Rio 2000. It's a long time ago, but now it comes into force with the Sustainable Fund Directive. We see in Europe that gives green or sustainability and greenwashing the requirement to fulfill concrete criteria based on sustainability, equality, diversity, freedom. And to fulfill those, you now have coming more and more reporting criteria into place. This is EU taxonomy for Europe. That means that for what you do, if you label yourself as impact or green bond or anything that has a relation to ESG, you need to prove. And if you need to prove, you need to do something. First of all, you should already have this in place, or you have to mitigate and to adjust on the criteria if you want to be ESG compliant. And so it comes into force that we get the consideration and the awareness that ESG criteria, ESG principles are that they have a value. Now they get financially based value, and I think there's a bit of a missing link in the political framework we see so far. We have the requirement of reporting, and so to implement ESG criteria and ESG conform acting, but you don't have an advantage of doing so. So you don't have an advantage for investors to invest in green bonds. You don't have an advantage to, for example, if you take green current from the grid, it's more expensive than the other way around, but it's cheaper in the production. So there's all that is sustainable or labeled with biolinks or anything. Often they are cheaper actually in the production, but they're
Thank you so much, Anya. And I think that your speech was really at the proper time, in the proper moment. And you have wrapped up everything so good, and you have touched upon so important issues, like starting from stereotypes that basically we have to, when solving the problem, we have to look into the root of the problem. And it's also important, like, not to forget, like, why the situation is like this, including because, like, men are definitely, they experiencing some pressure, and there are like some kind of expectations, as we say, like in Ukraine we say, like, successful success. So like society is expecting, like, from men successful success, and that they even must deliver like something, like they have to be successful in business, etc. And probably even if they have to be like less active, like the society doesn't allow them, or like those stereotypes or something like this. And that is why we have like to call upon, like, and to raise awareness of both, like, men and women, and because sometimes even women don't understand like where the problem is. And that is why it's really important to talk about this. And you have also touched upon like this taxonomy and greenwashing. And this is also the case. And I think that at some point, like this greenwashing, or like this, sometimes it's negative perception of some kind of green initiatives within the companies, or like business or public initiatives, where people say, okay, it's just like money laundering or something like this. And we have to admit that this is a reality, and at some point we will face the things when companies are doing this only because they have to, comply like with this ESG principles or like this international agreements or something like this. But once they see why it's really beneficial for business and why business is more successful and is the one who is actually benefiting from this, they would love to do this and to implement these policies. And yeah, so I'm really I think it's very important, everything what you have mentioned. And I see that we are perfectly on time, like with regard to speeches from all of you, and we managed to hear all of you. And if you allow me, like, I would like to wrap up just briefly. So, because we like having our events, our like workshops, anything we do to have it more practical. And not just like, to talk about some problems, but also to provide some kind of roadmap or produce a paper so that we set a goals, because once it's not put on into the paper, sometimes you really forget about this. So what we heard today is from Liana that it's really important to have data, to understand what we are talking about, to have this index. So only then we can track the progress, or probably which is not like the preferential option like regress. What we heard from Birgit is like this phrase, or I will repeat it, this work-family fusion, and I really love it. And it's really important. Laura, it's about plan the transformation. And it's always about at first setting the goal and making it transparent and understandable where we go. And what Anya said is that like we have to be realistic. Like once the war is over, and basically that is what is happening now. We have this severe damage to the infrastructure, and our, like we say, energy warriors, our energy front, people like energy engineers, thousands of them are immediately right after ES events are clear. They are there on the objects in order like to get back and to manage all those maintenance and like distractions and to bring the light back to people. And like when we are talking about this kind of immediate measures, we unfortunately don't have the luxury of thinking like whether it should be like whether it's climate aligned, gender aligned, etc. But again, we should, like when the strategy is there, and the strategy will be there on rebuilding Ukraine, we have to make sure that the gender aspect is taken into account there. And it's also our responsibility to speak up and to voice this. Franziska mentioned about this integration between like together like climate and gender bonds is definitely what we are gonna talk about like with Ukrgazbank as well. I see unfortunately that I think Alexei probably got lost the internet connection, but I'm really happy that he managed to speak here like and to be here. Yeah, so we have a few more minutes, and I'm once again really thankful to each of you and all of you for being here with us for this moment. And probably just briefly, if you just want to add one more point, how we can be agents of changes, how we can make the situation better in Ukraine in order like to bring this alignment with climate and gender things, just like one or two instruments. If you have something to add, please do. Yeah, Birgit, I see. Yeah, then Liana. Yes, please do.
I think I sent already an open invite on the text, but I would like to say that we are, from our end, we're building a kind of a city-to-city global initiative with front runners on sustainable ocean and renewable energy. And I think we would like to invite Ukraine and you guys to come in and be part of that so we can actually support as best we can with the other global leading hotspots as well, while you are still struggling with the Russian.
Yeah. Thank you, Birgit. Very much appreciated. Liane, please.
Yeah, just wanted to come in and actually touch on something that Birgit said, because I thought it was really, really important. And I think we are not just talking about rebuilding a sector. We are basically talking about rebuilding a society in the way society acts and interacts, both with the climate, with the energy, but also with each other. And I think this is an important opportunity to readjust, to actually have some of the systemic transformation that we need to also have gender equality, inclusivity, participation, decision-making, voice and agency of women and other gender diverse groups really integral to all of the planning and the rebuilding. And I think particularly, and I want to put that out, and I think this is one of the shortcomings of the climate discussions and also some of the sector discourses. ESG is helpful, but it's very much so, and Franziska has mentioned that, a safeguards approach. We need to go beyond safeguarding. We need to be human rights centered. We need to be gender equality centered. And this is very important, we will not able to have an energy transformation or a systems transformation without social support systems and making that front and center. And I think the war has showcased that, but also the energy crisis, the COVID crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the food crisis that we have seen that it's really core important to have social support systems, and including to relieve women of the unpaid care burden that is actually the backbone of, at the moment, underappreciated, underaccounted, underpaid for all economic activity. And this is an opportunity to change that and make sure that burdens within families, within society are more justly distributed. Thank you. And thanks again for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I see Laura wants to add something.
Thank you, Marina. Indeed, as I mentioned, as EIB, we have a very strong history of investing in Ukraine in partnership with the EU and other MDBs and UN. And this includes investments since 2014 in Western territories, which now, of course, the conditions of investments are not good at all. So we reviewed the plans of the Ukrainian government for the recovery and reconstruction planning. And we're very, very pleased to see that gender equality and climate smart action are mentioned and recognized as important policy objectives. So we are very keen to support these investments, but I think collectively we need dedicated attention to ensure that these policy objectives, on one hand, remain on the table, because it's clear that there are many priorities coming up, but at the same time, we need to have these objectives, as I said, kept on the table and put into practice and design in the investment. If we want to build back better, and if we want to leave no one behind, indeed, we need to keep this gender and climate priorities as into each and every instrument and each and every investments where these instruments are deployed. It's also critical, and I think this is something that can really accelerate the recovery, but we have a solid coordination structure operationally, where the different partners are brought together to coordinate the actions. And throughout this coordination, we also look at avoiding contradictory approaches, but instead looking at what I mentioned before, alignment and synergies. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you again for inviting me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Franziska, please.
Yeah, I would just add a very short comment because I know we're out of time, but I just want to say, something that always strikes me so much in these conversations, and I think they're so great and we need to continue to have them, is that the men are missing. Men need to be having these conversations. And I noticed the same thing. A colleague, was at COP a week ago, and, the gender day, it was all women. And maybe there was one man on the panel, and then the rest of the panels were, primarily men, and then maybe they had one woman on the panels. And it's so important that we talk about this as a group and frame the conversation about one that is really about inclusion. It's really about broader inclusion and whose voices are present in these discussions, and it's so important to frame it as such, and not a women's issue or about the care burden not being a woman's issue, but really a family issue or an economic issue as well. So yeah, that's just my last comment, and it's been such a great panel. So thank you so much for inviting me and also organizing it under such difficult circumstances.
Thank you so much, Franziska, but it's really important comment. And Anya, please add.
Just very small, also short, small comment. Actually, Franziska, is exactly what you said. We need to have men and women together. But the good thing is, as we saw today, there's one man in a women's group. Normally it's the other way around. You're the one women and the other men. They feel a bit stupid, and we do as well. So it's I think that's exactly the point. We are all the same. And I think one thing that we have not tackled today, but that will be the next one, this is refugees and the question of integration of cross-culture societies. And I think that will bring a big challenge to us, because we like what we know and we like what we understand, and that's actually, I think, why we feel comfortable in men or female groups, because we feel comfortable. But it gets interesting as soon as we mix it, and that's actually what we're trying to do.
I cannot but agree. Like it's really important and crucial. And Birgit, please.
Yes, and sorry, I just came back from Mumbai last week, and during lockdown we have built up the world's biggest gender equality conference in the maritime industry, and we actually have achieved 50% male participation. So I would be happy to, share any kind of, experiences, how we have worked on that for the maritime, which is also a very male-dominated industry, and where I really share the same. We need both genders aligned and both gender in the room to actually make this happen, especially as now the men holds the most power. So they also hold that power to change this, and they need to understand the issues and really own these issues and make them personal for them.
Because we try to answer how, and they say what. And we need to talk about issues and topics, and not about how we do that. But that's actually why we're doing that. So, but we should stop that more, or take more about the action on board.
True. And talking about raising awareness, and as mentioned, like we will have this recording of this brilliant panel. And given we didn't have chance like for the audience to connect and ask their questions, like we will give the chance to our audience to ask questions, and we will try like to coordinate it with you, and also we'll be happy if you will be able to address the questions. And also we will distribute the recording of this panel with all our members, with all the registered participants, and also via our channels. And we would love to take a picture of us, even though we are in different part of the world. But if just for a second, like you smile into the camera and we take a picture, so our coordinator Anastasia will help us and assist. Please, Anastasia, tell us whether you are ready and whether we can do this.
I'm ready.
Okay, ladies.
So I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We will also make sure that we will tag Alexei here, and he's again like I'm very happy that he managed like to connect, at least like for his speech, for his contribution. It's important to say what Ukrgazbank is doing, and I'm very sorry for like that we are out of time for 5 or even 6 minutes. But once again, I'm not tired like to repeat this, and this is from bottom of my heart. I'm very happy that all of us are here. We will be happy as Women Energy Club to cooperate with all of you, each of you, because you do provide priceless experience, pieces of advice to us, and just like support, which is also important. And we are in Women Energy Club. One of our main goals is to empower women, to bring this cooperation, collaboration, and networking. So we want to be together, we want to stay together, and we will provide definitely a roadmap, what to do, how to do, to make it better, to build a better society, to transform the industry, and that we have to ensure that there are role models for women in energy across every stage and at all levels, all the way up to the top. Thank you so much. Thank you for this panel. Please stay safe. Have a great evening in your part of the world, and please stay connected with us. Thank you. Goodbye.
Dobry wieczór.
Thank you.